Well, next on the show, as those wildfires continue to rage in Manitoba, Canada's UN Ambassador Bob Rae has been in Manitoba. He spent the day actually yesterday visiting Peguis First Nation, which is no stranger to natural disasters. Before taking his position with the UN, Bob Rae served, of course, as interim leader of the Liberal Party of Canada and also was Premier of Ontario. And he went to Peguis to talk floods, but then fire evacuees are there as well. And we're just grateful he's got some time for us this morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Great to be with you, Marcy. Thanks so much.
So why don't we just, I was going to ask, what brought you to Peguis and all that, but I wonder what stayed with you from being in Peguis yesterday with these folks that have been through so much flooding and then now they're housing fire evacuees.
The resilience. The community is fun. It's really a formidable place. I mean, it's a big community. It's 5,000 people. And it's the courage of the people, their willingness to take on, tough issues and deal with them in the community. It's just about making sure they have the resources to do what they need to do. But I had a really good meeting with the chief and council, with some of the experts that they brought in, an engineer who's been working for them for some time. They're trying to find ways of getting a solution to the flooding problem, because the flooding situation in the community is getting worse over the last 20 years, and the evidence for that is overwhelming. It's not a 1 in 200 year or 1 in 100 year problem. It's about a 1 in every 2 or 3 year problem right now, and that's crazy. And that means, again, the community has to evacuate. The community has to. There is no high ground around there. It's very flat. I mean, and they're actually in a valley in the
They
flat.
are, yeah.
So it means that's really where the water collects when it collects. Plus, they had a wildfire earlier this season.
And it's challenging because of the, like in the Red River Valley, you can sort of put a dike around a whole community. But because of those elevation changes in Peguis, the costs are much different to try to protect the area. I know that
there's an interesting study that they're doing right now. They've hired some top engineering firms to look at what could be done. And what they've found is, it's interesting, looking at the Red River Valley south of us in the United States, there's a number of communities that have taken steps to build reservoirs, to look at how can you push that, and that really that can change the dynamic considerably. So I think they're trying to find solutions that in the end, although there'll be an upfront cost, the actual savings from reducing the impact of the flood would be huge. Because every time there's a flood, it costs a ton of money. Of money from the federal government, because it's their responsibility, and it also costs the province a lot of money. So they're putting together a team. I was very impressed with the team that they've got, and the determination of the community, the real leadership, which happened. I saw it in New York because Mike Sutherland, who's sort of the guy who coordinates all these special projects, former council member, came to see me in New York during the Indigenous Forum, which is a 2-week event where Indigenous communities from around the world gather to talk about the UN Declaration and talk about a whole bunch of issues that are affecting them. And it's been a good new sort of experience for me to take all of my former life and knowledge of these issues from another movie into this job at the UN.
Yeah. The Peguis issue, obviously in Winnipeg, every time, as you said, every couple of years now we're seeing evacuees here in Winnipeg, and some of them here for, months and years, which is, I know part of the presentation that you were given yesterday was a Chief Operating Officer, Cindy Spence there, and she said, quote, "The ongoing failure to address the flood crisis in Peguis is more than a matter of poor policy. It's a violation of human rights." Would you agree with that at this stage, having been there with the people yesterday, and as you're talking about, this is something that needs to happen, change?
Yeah, it's an urgent problem. I mean, they have people who've been displaced from the community for a very, very long time. They have people who are still being put up in hotels in Winnipeg and elsewhere. And I can't think that there are too many other communities. I mean, if this happened in a community of 5,000 people anywhere else in Manitoba, you wonder, is this what would happen? At some point, you'd think that people would find a solution. And that's why I think it's important to look at what are the most cost-effective solutions from an engineering point of view that you can find. And the idea that the problem is not solvable or there's nothing we can do about it is not true. There are things that can be done.
What brought you there in the first place to Peguis yesterday for this?
The invite. I got an invite from the chief and council after the meeting I had with Mike Sutherland in New York at the Indigenous Forum. Yeah, and I think the Canadians should know that there is this remarkable Indigenous Forum that meets every year for two full weeks, and where we do bring together people from all over. And as the president of the Economic and Social Council, sounds like a very fancy title, at the UN for this year, we sort of the overseers of the Indigenous Forum. So we have to take it seriously. And when I do quite a lot of responding to people in my job and answering and visiting and trying to connect to communities around the world, the displacement problem is probably one of the biggest human rights and human condition, humanitarian problems we have everywhere in the world. 140 million people are displaced by natural disasters and by conflicts. And it's an unprecedented number of people in camps in different places.
I want to make sure we were focused on Peguis because that you were invited. That's why you were here, and that's a flooding story, obviously. But I wonder what conversations are happening about the wildfires on the international level, Bob Rae.
Well, a lot. I mean, we had them in Quebec 3 years ago, and the impact in New York was very real because the wind was coming straight down, and so New York became quite dark for a few days and hard to breathe. But more than that, than just sort of the personal impact, I think we all understand that the forest fires that are happening in Canada are a serious reflection on the impact of drought and the impact of a lack of rain in many different communities, but also just how dramatic these fires can be and the impact can be on a country like ours. But it affects many others. I mean, flooding in the United States, in forest fires in Los Angeles. You have many different examples around the world where natural disasters are becoming more violent, more impactful in terms of how they affect people, the extent to which they affect people. And notwithstanding what Mr. Trump might say, there's no doubt that they have a relationship to climate change.
Listeners have been screaming at me, actually, to have the climate change interview out of the wildfires. We've been doing the emergent situation and the needs and such, but some people have been saying, to your point about people being displaced around the world, that when it comes to fires, we actually shouldn't be using the term evacuees. We should be using the term climate refugees. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, that's a term that courts around the world have started using. I don't think there's any question that we're seeing a huge number of internally displaced people in our country who are being displaced by natural disasters that have become more serious because of climate change. I think the evidence for that is overwhelming. And what we need to understand as Canadians is we're not immune from the problems that affect the rest of the world. We might like to think, oh, this is a local issue, it just affects us. You say, no, this is actually a global issue that affects us locally. That's what it is. That's the meaning of globalization. That's the meaning of climate change. And that's the impact that it's having.
May I ask you, because you're here, about something that's leading the news today, across the country, which is the Liberal government poised to table this bill, knocking down interprovincial trade barriers. I appreciate that you're in your new role, but as a former Premier of Ontario next door here, I can't resist asking what you think the opportunity could be for Manitoba, knowing how goods move back and forth. What do you think that? Well, and do you think it's a long time coming? Like, is it something that in your time you would have loved to have seen?
Well, we saw some of it. We did see a reduction in trade barriers, but it was slow, and the process that was created was the best we could do at the time. But there was a lot of resistance in a number of different provinces for what that could possibly mean to them. And so we were able to get an interprovincial trade deal done in the 1990s, but it wasn't enough, and it didn't go far enough. And so I think what's happened as a result of the difficulties we're having with our southern neighbor, that this has forced us to think long and hard about what are the steps we can take to deal with a problem that's within our grasp. And I'm really proud of the premiers coming from very different situations, very different provinces, very different issues, a lot of traditional things that they've always said, well, we would prefer it if we could just do this ourselves.
Yeah,
and
different
not take
parties,
it-
different paths.
different
Yeah.
parties, different, all that stuff. And for them to come together so quickly and do this in a way that the federal legislation is really the legislation that enables everybody to do what they've already, in a sense, agreed to do. I think it's very, very dramatic and very positive.
Thank you very much for being in this morning with us. We didn't expect to see you. I know you were in the CBC building, and we were like, Bob Rae's talking at Audio Canada, so thank you for coming down to our studio.
I'm delighted to be on both sides of the linguistic community here in Winnipeg. It's great to be here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.